Welcome to our Cohasset Harbor Committee Public Forum. I'm George Baumgarten, Chair of the Harbor Committee, and this is an official Harbor Committee meeting, so I'm going to call it to order. The meeting is hereby called to order, and we'll do a roll call with our Harbor Committee. So Susan Bryant? Here. Lori Gibbons?
Here.
Derek Goodwin? Absent. Lisa Hewitt-Dick?
Here.
Jeff Donzie?
Here.
Mike Sardina?
Here.
Martin St. John is out. Jake Wheelwright?
Present.
Excellent. Well, we have a quorum. We can meet. Thank you all. The top priority of the Harbor Committee is climate resilience. This was identified in the Municipal Harbor Plan in 2020, and as we've gone about our business, this is a very important thing for us. We're going to conduct this, I'll go through the agenda in a minute, but as a forum, we're going to run it sort of like town meeting, which is we'll go through a bit of a presentation and then try and devote as much time as we can to folks who want to speak. We have a couple of mics and would appreciate you standing up and using those mics so that everybody can hear. We also are very pleased that 143 TV is filming this and videotaping it so that we have this as a record on videotape in the future. It's not live today, but it will be on videotape. I'd like to call out a couple of special guests that we have here who volunteered their time to be here. Connor Offson, if you might stand, Connor, and just describe who you are. Connor's with the Woods Hole Group and also a Cohasset native, so a double hit there. And then Robin Seidel is with Weston and Sampson. Those two firms were the primary firms responsible for the studies that are going to form the bulk of what we're presenting today over the past couple of years. Also very pleased that we have representatives from several town committees. I see David Farrick here, and thank you for representing Select Board. Anybody who's representing a committee, you're also a resident. We'd love to hear your opinion and perspective on what we're going through tonight. So looking at the agenda, we'll go through the meeting objectives in a minute. We're about on time then we'll do a recap. So the recap of Harbor Studies, 3 years worth of work, hundreds of hours, probably 10 hours worth of presentations. We're going to cover that in 20 minutes. So see how we do on that. And then the public comment period, we'll just be capturing that. Susan Bryant's going to be capturing notes here during that period, and we're just going to try and capture concerns, perspectives, questions, so that we have those for future reference. And then our target is to adjourn by 8:30. If you could go next slide, Julia. So our objectives today are to hear from you, everybody here who's a resident, about two things that we're sort of showing here today. Harbor flooding risks, we're going to go through that, and then we're going to go through some perspective, conceptual solutions that have been identified in the studies over the past couple of years, as well as a couple that more recently Harbor Committee has also identified. To be clear, the focus on climate resilience at the harbor is very intentional. Flooding is going to occur across the whole coastlines of New England and the United States. Our focus with Harbor Committee is really about protecting the infrastructure of the town. And that's in Jacobs Meadows, it's Elms Meadows where the water wells are. That's our focus. It happens that some of the solutions we're showing are happening in your neighborhoods, or it could happen in your neighborhoods. So we're really interested in the perspective of these solutions that are really there to protect the town, the wastewater treatment plant, public safety building, but the conceptual solutions we're looking at on Border Street, Summer Street, Black Horse Lane. Love to get your perspective on that. Gonna go through the recap in three parts. First, we're gonna really focus on trying to bring to light the probability of floods happening over the next 25 years. And then we'll spend the second part two, looking at conceptual solutions at Cohasset Cove, and then solutions at Black Horse Lane. Just to highlight, again, what the recap is, in June of 2023, Woods Hole Group led a study focusing on resilience, well, what they said, flood vulnerability assessment and resilience strategies. That was then built upon immediately by a study in 2024 that was both Woods Hole Group, Weston and Sampson, Collins Engineering, all get together. And that presentation was less than a year ago, and Harbor Committee has really embraced at least the initial findings of that, and want to keep public awareness of those high. What I would ask, and we're going to go through this, pretty quickly, and it's a lot of material to digest. We've provided handouts. Hopefully everybody has one. As we go through, I'd ask you to hold your questions, but where you have questions as I go through, flag the handout, make notes on it, and then we'll go through, and ideally during Q&A, if you want to refer to a slide that we're talking about, Julia will back up and forth and we'll be able to refer to the slide as you represent the problem. Next slide. Very simple. So this is part one. We're just going to talk about potential for flooding at the harbor. And what we're going to look through is a series of 3 or 4 slides that show a trajectory based on some really sophisticated data of what flooding might be in this area of Cohasset over the next 25 years. If you could go to the next slide, Julia. So from a key concept here, from the 2022 study, with this sophisticated data model that has been adopted by the state of Massachusetts, the Coastal Zone Management, it was developed and is still maintained by the Woods Hole Group. So Connor Austin is here today and can represent and address questions that may come up about that model. What the study in 2023 looked at is flood pathways and where are the highest risks of those. So I'm going to use a sort of geeky laser pointer, and we're going to really focus on what this slide says over the next 3 slides to understand the problem. So looking at all of Cohasset and where our infrastructure is at risk, there's flood pathways. And what that means is that's the easiest path for water to come through and potentially inundate town infrastructure. And when we say water coming through, it could be wind-driven, so this model can predict storm surge, wave overtopping, wind-driven. It can look at the difference between a nor'easter, winds coming from the northeast, or a hurricane that might be coming from the east or the south that's accompanied by significant rain. Very importantly, the top risk is right at the entrance of Summer Street and Black Horse Lane. The second highest risk for flooding is water overtopping the end of the harbor. So here's Cohasset Harbor coming right through. We're pointing right at the Legion. The new condominiums are just to that side. And then the third risk, also coming from the Gulf River, instead of going through at Black Horse Lane, water would find its way around and come through at Summer Street and South Main Street. And again, just to make sure, I almost want to see nods. We have Cohasset Harbor here, and then Border Street Bridge is coming around, and Border Street Bridge and the Gulf River. So those are the entry points for flooding into Cohasset, into the Cohasset infrastructure. Let's go to the next, Julia, thank you. This is a very busy slide. I'm going to spend a couple moments on it. You have handouts. The handouts are in black and white. This living color is helpful. First thing to notice, this is present day. This is the Massachusetts Coast Flood Risk Model. All the data in here is based on that, and it's showing the present day probabilities for flooding in this area. And once again, to orient ourselves, here's Cohasset Harbor and the Legion, then finding our way down Summer Street to Black Horse Lane to our top risk area, continuing on down to number 3, which is really pointed at St. Anthony's. Those are the top risk areas. What we're looking at with present day is, look a little bit at Connor. Any given 50 years, there's a 2% chance of flooding at this level in Jacobs Meadow, 0.5% to the left to the west of South Main Street, and then a 10% chance, so this is the highest risk, coming right through the Gulf River to Black Horse Lane. Again, in this busy slide, this is an important thing. So this is a depth gauge. What we're seeing here is this person standing at the 2.5 to 3 foot level. That's what this represents, 2.5 to 3 feet of water depth in Jacobs Meadow. When we look at Black Horse Lane area, it's 3.5 to 4 feet. And again, maybe I'm just going to go through this. I haven't reviewed this with the experts. I'm just a chairman of a committee. If there's things that need to be corrected, I'm going to count on Connor and Robin to clarify at the end of the presentation. So this is present day. This is 2025. Let's go to the next. So 2030, on your bottom left, this is what the data shows. So this Massachusetts coast flood risk model projects the risk of flooding in these key areas we're talking about. The risk, the probability, increases 5 to 10 times between now and 2030. We haven't seen it, it's hypothetical, but it's, actually we have probably Black Horse Lane residents who are catching a glimpse of this. But it looks like this could get more significant. Where again, the significance we can see is a lot of water in Jacobs Meadow, flooding through, even going over to starting to inundate to the left and right side of the commuter rail. We have the police fire, so the public safety building. When we're talking about resilience, again, we're going to go through solutions. You can't stop Mother Nature. What you can do is start to be more resilient to it. So I give credit to the town who's purchased a new fire station out on 3A. That's actually a resilience strategy, among other things. So they can station ambulances out there that could get to the rest of Cohasset, even when Elm Street might be flooded and cut off. So that's pretty significant. The wastewater treatment plant is a big focus here. Not easy to move a wastewater treatment plant, so it's staying where it is. They have gotten some grants over the past couple of years where they're raising their electrical infrastructure 5 feet. That's a really good thing. They are plugging manholes that could get inundated with stormwater runoff. Those are also good things. So they're taking steps, but this wastewater treatment plant is pretty significant to the overall town, in addition to the neighbors, who might be right in the middle of the solutions. Let's go to the next, Julia. So 2050 gets a little bit more concerning. This is 25 years from now. For all of you who have lived in Cohasset 25 years, this is a short lifetime. But the data is sort of showing an inexorable rise, where we, again, Cohasset Harbor. This is a significant flood where it overtops Elm Street. We have a great depth of water, perhaps somewhere between 5 and 10 feet of water in Jacobs Meadow. It's coming clear through and cutting off Summer Street. It's cutting off South Main Street. It's flooding parts of the village. The commuter rail, I think it's raised up, but could be challenged there. We also have water wells for Cohasset Water Service that are up in Elm Meadows, right near Spring Street, and those are at risk. From the commentary in June of last year, when this was presented, Nasser Brahim, who was with Woods Hole Group and is a colleague of Connor's, this was his commentary. So the model predicts flooding to increase another 5 to 10 times between 2030 and 2050. In 2050, the probability of flood events is a 50 to 100% chance, meaning every 1 to 2 years on average, this turns a rare event into a significant nuisance and impact on daily life. The Cohasset Village floods significantly. Floods extends west to the rail tracks. And we've got along Elm, Summer, and Main Street, 4.5 to 5 feet of water. That's the potential. And yeah, so that's sort of the scary story. Again, it's all a probability, but it's why we're here, and to the degree we're seeing this, it's pretty significant. Just by comparison, I want to go to the next slide, Julia. This is same area. This is the these are the FEMA coastal flood zones. This is the data that people may be familiar with for many years. And, home insurance rates and other things are based on this. I think a significant observation is that the FEMA data is based on historical, the FEMA flood map. So it is showing flooding in the same area we're talking about, but it is not a forward-looking model. It doesn't predict sea level rise. It's not dynamic and can't model storms and storm surge. And it's really, what do we say here? It's based on historical data for frequency and severity of storms. So given that this is what we had for years, the state of Massachusetts invested with Woods Hole Group to develop this model, which actually covers, the model we just went through, covers the entire coast of Massachusetts and can be used for modeling storms all the way down, not only to the neighborhood level. You can see your house. It can model storms right down to an address that is potentially at risk. Let's go to the next, Julia. So now we're switching gears. That was the problem, and what particularly the focus of the study last year is what are the conceptual solutions? When I say conceptual solutions, we're being very careful about this. There's no funding. These projects are hypothetical, they're conceptual, but the reason we're so pleased to have you here today is we're trying to get a little more clarity and perspective from you who live in these areas of these conceptual solutions, what some of the perspectives are. The importance of getting that perspective and understanding the solutions we're looking at is that in the future, when Cohasset does seek funding, either from you in town meeting or in grants or a combination of both, we want to make sure we're pursuing the solutions that make the most sense for Cohasset. When private development and public works are contemplated, we want those works to be aware of what these potential solutions are so that they might be able to contribute to the progress. Before I leave this, we do have a model here. This is Robin Seidel, who she could stand up and show herself, but this is during a walk around in June. She's holding a big yardstick, and you can see what the potential for flooding is. Where Robin is standing is right on the wall, very near the Veterans Memorial, right in front of the new condominiums. This is the 2030 level. This is the potential 2050 level that we saw modeled. The Massachusetts Coast Flood Risk Model also does show 2070. When we look at the solutions, we're really looking at sort of the minimum you'd want to do is try and resolve for 2030, for 5 years from now. Ideally, we build solutions with the investment we have to try and go after 2050. 2070 is a big stretch, but we'll see. If you could go to the next slide. So we're going to show two solutions here, two conceptual solutions. This is one that was developed last year. So some key things, also a lot of data here. What you're looking at is Border Street, the harbor right here, the Veterans Memorial, and then going around to the condominiums and over to Margin Street. Currently, the height, so in flood control, inches matter, feet matter. Where we currently see on Border Street, at least this area is around 8 feet high. Everybody who's driven here in a king tide has seen water overtop these areas. So that's sort of our current experience of flooding. What this solution is proposing is to gradually increase, and I'm going to go through these quickly, not exhaustively, increase the elevation of this road and create a barrier for the water to overtop. as well as create a seawall. So just pointing out, again, you can look on your slide, the existing top of the wall is around 9 feet. The existing roadway here is 8 feet. The design flood elevation, the target, at the very least that we'd want to do if we pursued this solution, is raised from 8 feet to 11 feet. So add another 3 feet of height at least to this road. Ideally, we go for 2050, and you build up to 2050 to have that much more resilient solution. Part of the reason these are conceptual is that's really good at keeping water out, at least we think so. Anything we do here, though, there's a tide gate going in, so any future studies also have to address if water gets over it or if there's huge rainfall, how are we going to get the water out of the James Brook area? So there's more work to do on understanding both the tide gate engineering as in addition to the roadway, and also understanding stormwater runoff, particularly in a hurricane where you'd have the competing forces of storm surge coming in from the ocean and rain coming in from the James Brook watershed, which goes all the way out to King Street and Wampatuck. We have Jack Buckley here, who's an expert in that area. Let's go to the next. So very different drawing. This is sort of what the Harbor Committee does. We noodle on stuff and looked at another solution. This has not been endorsed by the consultants, but we're exploring it. So this is one of two solutions at the Cove that we're talking about. There may be many more. Key thing here is, remember we said the current roads over here are 8 feet high? Well, the Harbor Cohasset condominiums were built to a 13-foot level. That's not a coincidence. They're aware that flooding is going to happen. So, and Margin Street, right at its crest, is also at a 13-foot level. So this essentially creates that barrier to water overtopping at 13 feet all the way around. The public green space that they've supported, that would get wet. But there's a wall here, and all of this is at 13 feet. What this solution is proposing is related to the one I just showed, but it would entail building a retaining wall, increasing the height of an existing retaining wall that is, I believe, on the private property. And then this is a public parking lot, and then increasing the height of walls all along this way, and bumping up the elevation of Border Street just right here, up to 13 feet. And people are familiar, this is the Field of Flags. This is already at 13 feet elevation. So this solution, if it were to work, leverages high ground on both sides of the solution. And again, here's the tide gate for those who haven't seen that kind of thing. This tide goes through here, underground, and goes all the way out to James Meadow. Let's go to the next. So that was Cohasset Cove. And again, thinking through, we'd love to hear your perspective on these in just a moment when we go to the public comments. Once again, we have Robin, during our walk around a year ago, holding the yardstick, showing the potential for flooding. What's right behind you? This is Black Horse Lane. The picture is taken from Summer Street. So standing on Summer Street looking toward Black Horse Lane, level of flooding 2030 is at ankle depth where Robin is standing, close to waist deep at 2050, and obviously higher in later years. Let's go to the next. So I'm going to show three solutions here. Two that were developed last year, and another one that was explored the year before, and we're sort of opening that up. So and I think several of you participated or had a chance to come to the coffee houses that were held by Weston and Sampson and Woods Hole Group last year and had a chance to discuss these. Let's orient ourselves here. Here's the harbor. This is the Veterans Memorial, the condominiums, the Legion. Go down Border Street, follow Summer Street down. Here's the entrance of Black Horse Lane, and then you continue on Summer Street till it hits South Main and St. Anthony's. The proposal here is described as super elevated Summer Street. The existing roadway is, again, at that magic 8-foot level that used to work for years and years, not so good now. The design flood elevation for 2030 is raise it to at least 11 feet, and at 2050 to 13 feet. So this proposal would raise the road by, somewhere between 3 and 5 feet. There would have to be some real working with the homeowners in order to be able to get from their driveways and from Sankey Road and other places into this. What it does, water could come flowing down Black Horse Lane. It would get blocked by this super elevated Summer Street, and ideally would not overtop it and flood Jacobs Meadow. This again is typically in a big storm. We'll come back to that. Let's go to the next slide. So here's another solution, similar, but it's using a retaining wall and an earthen berm. So on the side of Summer Street that's closest to the harbor, build up an earthen berm that again will serve as a barrier to water flowing through really right along this side of Black Horse Lane. Have some walls along Black Horse Lane on both sides, a little bit of elevation to the other side, has the same effect, but it uses walls instead of a elevation of Summer Street. Again, a lot of data here, but really remember, a lot of Cohasset's at 8 feet, and we want these barriers to be at either 11 feet or 13 feet or even higher in order to protect the town. Let's go to the next. So this is the same view of what we just saw, but we're looking toward the harbor. St. Anthony's is down below. You're looking along Summer Street, Black Horse Lane to the right. These are the walls. So walls that would be built in a big storm. Water would come flowing in, be blocked by these walls, be blocked by this berm, and then when the storm abated or the tide recedes, the water goes back where it came. Let's move to the next. So this is, you can tell, it's the solution that was not developed by the consultants, but there is a slide on the next page that shows it. So this concept is down Black Horse Lane. Again, orienting ourselves, St. Anthony's here, Summer Street, harbor up there, Black Horse Lane coming down, and this is essentially proposing to build a barrier right where the Gulf River meets the neighborhood of Black Horse Lane in this this waterway. Currently, this gets a lot of water in it, particularly at king tides, and I think the Black Horse Lane folks can well represent what they've seen there. But the idea of this potential solution is this is high ground, and this is high ground. The solution connects the high ground. The way it would do that is, and this is, again, very high level, either raise the road, build a wall, something to create the barrier, and then at Black Horse Lane, raise the level of Black Horse Lane to whatever that wall is. So Black Horse Lane, be straight down, and then there'd be a hump, a big hump, and it would continue down. This is one solution. There's a lot of solutions looking at Black Horse Lane. The key thing about this is Black Horse Lane, water flows in and out of there sort of freely today, particularly at high tides. This area right now, this causeway, this is just essentially a jumble of rocks that were put there probably 100 years ago that enabled cars and access between these 2 points. This is the driveway that enables access to this property. What this would involve is adding tide gates, some sort of tide gate technology here, as well as tide gate technology here. An advantage of a solution, if we were to build it this far out, is that it both solves for flood pathway number 1, the highest risk, and it potentially solves for flood pathway number 3, the third highest risk. A challenge of this solution, particularly compared to the others, this part is private property. This is private property. It's challenging to build these kind of things in collaboration between a town and private homeowners, particularly with beautiful waterfront property. That being said, a solution like this has the potential to protect houses on the other side of the barrier, so there's a benefit. The other solutions we looked at, and really a primary reason the Summer Street solutions are looked at, it's mostly in the public right-of-way. So the town has a lot more ability to execute on the project and control of the project. The same essentially is true at Cohasset Cove. Let's go to the next. This is the same solution. Study was done in 2023. And so this is not new to Woods Hole Group or Weston and Sampson. It wasn't, I think, there's a number of reasons it wasn't fully built out, but again, the fact that it's on private property and there's just, it's unclear how that would work, it wasn't built out. But what we do see is the causeway, just what we showed, and something to create higher ground to connect the solution, the conceptual solution to the high ground on this side and over here. And you can see that, some thoughts about upsizing the culvert, putting in a tide gate, putting in a tide gate over here. Either the private road is raised or there's some sort of barrier placed in front of it. Tom Bell is here from Conservation Commission. Anything we're doing here in Cohasset is going to be subject to Conservation Commission reviewing it, following state law, making variances possibly, but none of these solutions are simple from that respect. There's a lot of things that Concom needs to protect, and this solution certainly would get a lot of scrutiny. Let's go to the next. That was the problem. Those are the solutions. And what I'd like to do is we're switching to public comment. So Lisa, do you want to just come up with me? And Susan's going to take notes. Again, we really thank 143 TV for being here to videotape this. I also want to thank Julia Gillis, who's in the planning office, assistant town planner. Thank you, Julia, for really coordinating this. These things are not simple to do. Let's give them a hand for a moment. Thank you. Yeah, so the deal is we'd love to hear from you. That's why we're here. And if you wouldn't mind, there's a mic over there. There's a mic here. And if this one's on.
Hello. Thank you, everybody, for coming this evening. This is wonderful for this type of turnout, and it's great to see so many friends and neighbors. Just a little bit of a housekeeping, and I know George has already said it, and it's up there before you, but we just thought we'd go through the rules. Please cover the microphone. Very good, very good. Wait till you call. She jumped the gun, but that's okay. State your name and address. Keep remarks to 2 to 3 minutes, and we're not trying to be strident on that, but if we have no idea how many people would like to speak, so if you could keep it concise. And I also think another rule is that it's helpful in this sort of forum is if somebody's already said it, and you don't really have to reiterate it the second time. And reference a slide number if helpful to others. So thank you.
Okay, thank you. Actually, I have a question about the problem. So, and this is just an assumption.
And you are?
Oh, thank you. Mary Jo Larson, 12 Virginia Lane. So, I understand the risk to the harbor. I just wanted clarification. When you describe the risks that go to the Gulf River, is that because of sea level rise? Is that coming from the ocean in Scituate, or is that coming from like heavy rainfall going down the Gulf River, or perhaps both? But could you just clarify what's the source of risk from that angle?
Thank you. It's coming up under the Border Street Bridge and coming from the ocean. So it's a storm surge or sea level rise. Either one of them can have the same result. Storm surge could be wind driven, and depending on which direction the wind is from, Tom Bell gave a presentation for us in 2022, that can have a significant impact on pushing the water down the lane. But this models that we're showing are not based on stormwater runoff. That's like the next step in understanding the problems that we're trying to solve. This is all storm surge. And really, I think the easiest thing for me to understand is think of it as an extreme storm, like the one we saw in October of 2022. I think that washed some boats up onto the Cohasset Cove. we've seen these. That's what we're talking about. Thank you. Jack.
Thank you. Jack Buckley, 272 North Main Street. This question's probably for the engineers in the audience, and I'm wondering, say, for example, if a solution were chosen at the head of the cove, is there any modeling that shows how the other storm-type pathways are impacted? So if you stop the water at point X, it's going to find its way to points Y and Z. So is there any modeling that shows how the storm-type pathways that aren't targeted for solutions, how they're affected?
Robin would love to have you answer that.
I'll jump in on that. So they did do a study, Woods Hole Group did do a study, I'm just speaking on their behalf right now. But Woods Hole Group did do a study where they looked at different solutions, if they were to block one area versus another, what the reduction of flooding would be, instead of going with this holistic approach. So what you're seeing, keep in mind, is just really 2 to 3 specific areas. There's flooding and coming from other places, but this has the most impact. This will get you the most reduction. So if we do one area but not another, depending on the storm, you might see some reduction, but you're still gonna see a good amount of volume because these areas are so low. So we did look at different solutions and tried to see the best places to invest money, and that's why when you see throughout town all the places it could come, you could see coastal flooding, this is where we focused on because it had the most benefit and it was the smallest area of impact.
Robin, could you identify yourself just?
Yes, Robin Seidel, Weston and Sampson.
And living just, because I'm not sure, I'm going to just ask a question. If the town invests and solves the problem at Cohasset Cove, builds a barrier, will it deflect water and cause more water to come down Black Horse Lane because we built a solution at Cohasset Cove?
It shouldn't. The next step of this process, as you mentioned, was to start looking at if we build these solutions, what are the impacts? Hypothetically, with coastal flooding, water will come in during a storm and it will go back out when the tide recedes. There's a different issue that you all have, which is where you have high ledge underground, so there's not a lot of place for your water to go once it lands, and so that's why I heard a lot when we were doing public engagement about issues with groundwater of impacting your basement. So the next phase of this study, we propose to look at both overland hydrology and the issues with high groundwater that would occur because of all the rock that you have just underneath the surface, combined with the coastal modeling and the solutions proposed. So I can't give you a definitive answer on that, but I would say that you're not gonna see, and it's not gonna cause more flooding by building that solution along Black Horse Lane area than you would currently see if there was no solution in place.
Thank you.
Clarification. Did you first say that the concept of the work that the cove would cause a deflection, but then you also said?
Yeah, either for both the cove and the work along the Black Horse Lane, yeah.
Okay,
And somewhere.
thank you.
Done, Jack? I just wanted to ask a quick follow-up question. Was that,
Okay, come up to the mic, Jack. Thanks.
is your answer confined to the study area? In other words, is there downstream effect in the Gulf River? Or is that outside the bounds of the study?
There shouldn't be downstream effects of the Gulf River because we were specifically looking at coastal tidally influenced flooding. So what should come, like today, if you do nothing, water will come in, flood the area, tide will go out, and it will go back out. And because we see these high tide events twice in a 24-hour period, sometimes maybe 3 times over the period of a large storm event, you'll see the water come in and it'll flood 2 to 3 times during that period. It'll come in and go back out. There's the nuance to this, to your point, is with the riverine piece of this. When you have high rainfall events on top of coastal flooding events, you have the tides coming in, rain's coming down, rain can't get out. So it is adding to that volume, but if you do something like this where you're blocking the tide from coming in, and if you were to use, tide gates in a really strategic way during these events, you're actually creating a space for that rain to go to, and then when the tide goes out, you can open the gates and let the water out. So there's benefits to being, to thinking about how and when you might want to shut your tide gates during these events if you were to able to put a barrier in place.
Thank you.
Don't go far.
Joe?
Joe Coggins, 57 Elm Street. We back up, our house backs up to Jacob's Meadow. And with what you were just talking about with rain events, when they brought the train back to town, what the MBTA did was clean out everything that used to take 18 to 24 hours to come down from Sanctuary Pond off of the hill and then work its way into the Jacob's Meadow. Now it takes about 3 hours. So is anything being considered about, once the water does get in, it's going to be fighting, especially on rain events that go 4 or 5 times, there's going to be no place for it to go. So is there any discussion going on about building retention ponds back up to those feeder areas where it used to take time to come in? Does that make sense?
So I can't speak to what the town's plans are on
That's why I was
on
looking
that.
right there.
Yeah, but I do have something to add to that may help. So right now, in that area, you're saying water is coming down and it's filling in very quickly. And it's kind of competing against the coastal flooding that's coming in, which is preventing it from going out. So if you were to be able to build a barrier and an updated or really functional tide gate there, you'd be able to close the tide gate at low tide. There would be almost no water in Jacob's Meadow area, so that as a storm event comes in, the rain can fall, drain into that area, and it wouldn't be competing against the coastal flooding, so there'd actually be somewhere for it to go. Then after the storm tide goes out, you open it, water goes back out into the ocean.
Right.
So
They
it would,
do that now?
yeah, it would have a benefit.
Yeah, they do that now.
Okay.
And it does work, but with any kind of 2 or 3 inch rain,
Right.
it's already lapping at the back doors and of the houses. So it just, if we're looking at this for a total solution, at least a discussion on, because there used to be one up behind the Little League fields,
Yeah.
where we'd spend some time there mostly because of blockage. But there may be something that can,
I think that's why the next phase of this project is to do the hydraulic study
Right.
to really understand where the water is coming from and what improvements can be made. And then when you couple the coastal flooding intervention projects with the hydraulic overland flooding from rainwater, that's when you're getting that sweet spot.
Thank you. And I want to highlight that when I invited Robin and Woods Hole Group to come, they jumped at the chance. They're volunteering to be here. They're not under contract with the state, or with town of Cohasset. And one of the things that our harbor committee wants to do is we want to keep building on these studies, because we believe the data. It looks like it's, we're in for some challenges. So, an opportunity I pointed out earlier is listening to this group. What's the priority of trying to address these problems? How do we get that priority, either by influencing town meeting or talking with the select board or doing whatever we need to do in order to focus the town's and our committee's priority on going after the next grants. Everything we've just seen, again, is by not even close to shovel ready. These are concepts that a next study, which doesn't cost that much money, I don't think, it's in 6 figures, not 7 figures, would study the intersection of storm surge with rain events and, model these different solutions that we want to see. But again, we're not concrete at this time. Debbie?
Debbie Shad, 31 Summer Street, right at the intersection of Black Horse Lane. I have a big question and then a less big question. Are these like the Cohasset Cove solution and then the Summer Street Black Horse Lane solution? Is this envisioned as one or the other, or both, or all three of these?
And actually, if you could bring up one of those slides. I don't think, I would offer we want to pursue both solutions. I can't, maybe Robin knows if they were designed to go together.
They are.
But, so yes, they're designed to go together. They still might have to be phased, but the idea of trying to solve for the big problem of flooding of Cohasset infrastructure, we need both solutions to be prioritized and funded in some way or another by the town.
Okay, and then, so, I don't know which slide is my question here, but I don't fully understand what these retaining walls, earthen berms on Summer Street, at the beginning of Black Horse Lane would do, but it sounded to me like the water's gonna come in Black Horse Lane.
Yeah. So water's coming this direction, and
Right.
surging up from the Gulf,
Right.
actually surging under the Border Street Bridge, finding its way over here, possibly wind-driven if there's a hurricane coming from the east, surging up to here, getting blocked by a 3 to 5 foot berm here, blocked by a wall. I think what we're also showing here is that Black Horse Lane gets elevated so people can drive over Black Horse Lane, which at the point of, at somewhere is around also 3 to 5 feet high, and then they come back down to Summer Street where they can continue on their way.
But-
The water comes in here, big storm, surge, height, king tide, all of it, and then when the tide goes out, the water goes out the way it came.
But is the effect of these basically, the water comes in, it hits these berms and basically pools, at my house or in the corner of Black Horse Lane?
Yeah.
It's the houses on the other side of Summer Street are protected, but all that water that might have
Right.
gone over there is gonna stay on the other side.
So I'm going to take a shot at this answer because it's been a particular one that's come up a bunch. So if we didn't, let's say that there's 3 feet of height of water coming through here. If we had no solution at all, then there's 3 feet of water coming down Black Horse Lane and potentially impacting and flooding people's yards and first floors of their houses. If we build this solution, it's still just 3 feet of water. Again, part of this is this big concept of it's the Atlantic Ocean that's coming into your house. It's a huge body of water. It's not going to pool up and form a 4 or 5 feet of water on this side of the barrier. It's going to be the same height. The water that can't get in here is going to be out in the Atlantic Ocean, not being pressured into here and raising the level because the berm is here.
I guess that just doesn't, I don't understand that. I mean, if we don't do anything, it comes in at 3 feet, but it'll cross Summer Street. It'll
Yeah.
go across Summer Street on the other side.
So looking at Connor is going to try to address this.
Yeah, thanks. It's a great question. We get it all over the state. Every project we have on the coastline, if we put up a barrier, people are wondering, where does this water go? And like Robin was getting at, with rainwater, there is a theory of flood storage. You can create space where you direct your water, and it fills there and it doesn't flood you here. But with the storm surge from the coast and from the Atlantic Ocean, as George put it, that water is coming no matter what. It's that barrier, if that barrier is there or it's not there, there's 3.5 feet of flooding above the ground. So it's really just blocking the flood pathway, but it's not turning that water around and pushing it into your house. I realize that your house is on the outside of that flood barrier, and that is not a good situation, and I completely empathize with that. But I think maybe a way to think about it is the reverse, like trying to drain the storm surge of a storm. You could maybe dredge the harbor, and you could make the harbor bigger, and you would think maybe we're filling up the harbor with more water, so the water level's gonna drop, but the town of Cohasset dredges across the harbor, the tide still reaches the same level. You can't drain the ocean to lower your flood level. I'll be happy to talk to you after.
Well, and it's probably going to come up again, but thank you, Connor. We're going to keep working that. Yes?
Hi everyone, I'm Johannes Pfeifenberger, 113 Border Street. I want to follow up on this particular question because the Gulf River is not like the ocean. There's a very narrow inlet, and even at high tide, the elevation of the Gulf River is several feet below the elevation of the harbor because it's just too narrow to come under the Border Street. So how has that been factored into this? Because what Debbie just said, you know, the Gulf River, I mean, the water coming in, there isn't an infinite amount of water that's coming in, so there would be a sort of pooling storage effect. And the smaller the pool, the higher the Gulf River could raise. But how does that interact with, have you assumed that the Gulf River storm elevation would be the same as out in the harbor?
Thank you, Connor.
Yeah, it's a great question, and your point is well taken. The Gulf is a smaller body than the ocean and the harbor itself. So it's hard to kind of just theorize in our head what might happen. So we did put that into the model, and we did see what would happen. Where would the water go? Would it be redirected? Would we displace it and cause greater flooding elsewhere? So through that dynamic model, including the winds, the waves, the surge, we did not see any measurable impact.
So does your model capture that the elevation of the Gulf River, even at high tide, is lower than out in the harbor?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Philip Faulkner, 17 Black Horse Lane. Go forward one more slide. That's backwards. So one of the Black Horse Lane example with the barriers on Black Horse Lane.
Okay, keep going. 7, this one?
This one right here.
Okay.
Two items. Since I live at the confluence of the water coming off of South Main Street and the water coming up the Gulf, right at the point where it crosses over Black Horse Lane, there is a point where the water meets right there and floods. And the 3 or 4 times it's flooded all the way back up to the funeral house up on South Main Street was the times when it was high rain, over 2 inches, and super high tide, over 12 feet. And one of the...
So, Phil, you're talking flooding in this area?
That's correct.
Okay.
And the more intense rainstorms we've been having as a result of the climate changing is providing more intense rain as a result, the water coming down from South Main Street, but also from Situate, which includes the new, over the last 3 years, Situate pulled that dam off of the retaining wall dam that's up by North Situate,
Yeah.
by the old Quonset huts where the condos are. That used to be a dam where the Lincoln Mill was, and that held a lot of water coming downriver. Now that flows straight into the river, along with all the water coming off the golf course on the other side of North Main Street, North Situate. As these intense rainstorms get more intense, and it's pumping water in so it won't drain as Joe says, it doesn't drain fast enough during low tide, and suddenly meets up. During the high tide, our backyards get flooded. I guess the 2 things I'm asking for is, I would encourage us to do the flooding evaluation, but also bring in our friends over in Situate, because the amount of building they've done in Situate, all that water is just coming straight down the Gulf. and meeting underneath the bridge. The only other piece, two other pieces I would say. The Egypt Beach Dam, or the berm that they built, that area is, we're in an island over on part of Cohasset, it's an island. It used to be a river, or it used to be a tidal area going from Egypt Beach, around by the golf course, coming back in and meeting up with the Gulf River.
Yeah.
And during most high tides, it would actually flow through. They built Egypt Beach Barrier that was blown away during the '78 hurricane, because we had this wonderful person living across the street on Black Horse Lane named Mr. Tolman, who's 90 years old. He was telling them the stories about the '78, blizzard of '78, where that berm got blown away. The water came down and flooded his house, all of Black Horse Lane. And that was an example of, we do have to worry about upstream, including Situate. I doubt that the area is going to break again. So my encouragement is to do the evaluation of the flooding from Situate and also the rainstorms.
Yeah.
And my last comment is the causeway over to the old Brown Estate, or the old Bigelow Estate.
Yeah,
That was originally Westgate Lane.
it's sort of showing there, yeah.
Yes. That was a town road, and it got privatized. Is there any way, this is a question that comes back up, is it has been privatized, but is there a way of reclaiming a public road? Because that used to go all the way through to the harbor.
So, yeah, more research to do there. The little bit that we've looked at shows that it's private property. And-
So, thank you. I guess.
But that's just a little bit we've seen.
Yeah.
Yes.
Hi, Laura Soderberg, 16 Black Horse Lane. I actually have two questions that I think are more directed, actually I don't know where to direct them in this room. They're not engineering questions. The first is in living in Cohasset and living at Black Horse Lane, we have had the flood waters come and basically lap up against the back foundation of our house. Our yard gets flooded and our kids go out on boats and basically sit and boat. I mean, I think January of a couple of years back, the water was just so high. And we're seeing, we do have floodgates built into the part of our house, so it will flood under our house and then go back out, but that's sort of just the context of where I'm coming from. So my question is, I have two questions, and the first is with regard to the town of Cohasset and the Conservation Commission and how important those priorities are in this town to conserve our town. Do we have precedent as to when do the Conservation Commission priorities, when are they maybe set aside or compromised, I don't know if that's the right word, when it comes to protecting town structure and infrastructure? Because I understand a lot of this is to actually protect our town infrastructure. So at one point in time, I would hate for the progress on these kinds of projects to be caught up in this odd dynamic of, we have to conserve the beauty of our town, but we also have to conserve the infrastructure for our town. So I'm anticipating that somewhere down the road, as you talk about, this is gonna be a long road. I hate for that to be a large hurdle to try and get over, and if we can start having those conversations early enough that says, where do our priorities balance here?
Okay.
And the second thing gets a little bit back to, I didn't know that about Westgate Lane, but how does the concept of eminent domain in the town of Cohasset work?
Slide 17, thanks. How does eminent domain work?
Is there a concept of eminent domain and, can the town on behalf of our public works and everything to protect the infrastructure, are there any muscles to flex to get even, private property either reclaimed or some other kind of movement so that we can protect the larger priorities of the town? And of course, I love this solution, I love this
Yeah.
solution because that does
And
protect,
you live right here.
that's actually, yes, and that's the area that floods, and
Yeah.
it's just, it's unpleasant, but,
Well, I have a couple people that I might call on, and just say, so Tom Bell is here from Conservation Commission, gets challenging questions all the time. But so Tom, let's suppose that there's momentum behind a solution like this. How does Concom come into the picture?
Tom Bell, 63 Howard Road, and I'm on the Conservation Commission. I'd first start by saying that we issue variances when, to all of our regulations, in fact, when it's in the public interest. So if there were a flooding, so the larger the public interest, the greater chance we're going to issue a variance. So we certainly wouldn't, I can't speak for the entire commission, but I sincerely doubt that we would interfere or block any thing that had to do with flood control here. So I think, yeah.
Thank you, Tom. And David Farrick is here, member of the Select Board. Great to have you here, David.
Thank you. David Farag, 39 Beechwood Street. I'm a member of the Cohasset Select Board. The comments that I'm making tonight are as an individual and not for the Select Board in any way, shape, or form, so I'm sure they're all happy to hear that. I just want to bring up something for everyone's consumption here, for the Harbor Committee, people sitting here and watching at home, and those who will watch this hopefully on YouTube afterwards, is that the town of Cohasset has had a number of projects through the years that have dealt with flood control that have actually worked, and they're actually working today, but you might not notice them. I want to just go over a couple of them briefly, so that would be for everybody can understand it. And before the Select Board, I was on the Conservation Commission for over 10 years, and I was the chairman for a majority of it. So we had a number of projects that came in front of us. We had projects that we were involved in with the town, with other groups and the like. So we became the flood committee as much as the Conservation Commission. But the first one is the Straits Pond Tie Gate, which is down at West Corner, which some of you might or might not be familiar with. With that one, that particular tie gate, you have 3 different towns where that all intersect at the same time. So if you remember, way back when, there was a midge problem at Straits Pond, which would happen because of the mud flats that were created there. And so the tie gate needed to be replaced there and be on a more automated schedule in order to create more salinity into Straits Pond in order to take care of the midges and then, of course, create a better flow down there. And so with that one, you had 3 towns that had to agree on it, which Hingham, Cohasset, and Holland's hard to agree on the day of the week, let alone a tie gate and the permitting and everything that went behind it. But with federal funding, state funding, and all the different boards came together and did it, and it's there today. And as you drive over to Hull, you can see the tie gate, and it works wonderfully. The second one is our harbor tie gate, which you've shown there, which was updated, and I can't remember the year. With that one, that was updated, and again, to protect, if you get storm surge coming in, to protect especially the sewer department, and of course Jacobs Meadow, and by extension, James Brook and the village as well. But obviously the first thing was to protect the Cohasset Sewer Department on Jacobs Meadow because it could get absolutely flooded and wiped out. Depending upon, so that stops that when we know, a storm's coming in, the tie gate can go down and can do that. So that's the second project that the town of Cohasset has had, which has worked out to the best. The third I would bring to your attention was when we had the little harbor sewer project. As a part of that, which was an add-on to it, there was a number of different flood control measures that were put in because there was flooding in different areas of Jerusalem Road Drive, Haystack Lane, and other areas along the way. Storm scepters were put in, different ways of moving the water, which used to stand there. It's moved out to the ocean, it goes through a storm scepter, cleans it, the sludge stays there, DPW takes it out, and then the fresh water goes out to the ocean. So I just bring up these 3 projects just for everybody to understand that there's been times in the past where Cohasset has had projects dealing with flood control on a number of various issues in a number of different neighborhoods, and that we've been able to come together and actually do things on them, and they've been successful. And the reason you don't hear anything about them is because they actually work. So, you know, you only hear about something when it breaks down or when there's a problem. So, I just leave that for everybody to know and put in the record. Thank
So,
you.
Dave, if you could stay at the mic a moment, because I have a couple questions, and we're going to stay on this slide. I'm also going to call an audible. Glenn Pratt has joined us, was a little bit late coming in. There's some work that's going to happen on the Veterans Memorial, and I'd love him to be able to share that in a minute, Glenn. But first, the question came up about eminent domain. That comes up. I think in Harbor Committee and looking at these solutions, you know, the ideal situation is public good, where everybody agrees. Any one of these solutions, not just the one that shows up on private property on Black Horse Lane, is going to require a lot of collaboration between the town, the consultants, and homeowners who are right on the front line of whatever solution it is. So I would say the ideal is to gain momentum and consensus around what is the best solution for the town, for the neighborhood, for the homes, for the homeowners. I asked you to stay up because the question is there any times when Cohasset has exercised eminent domain to purchase property from somebody and the homeowner probably was unwilling?
I know there has been, but I can't think of any off the top of my head. I think the last eminent domain that is fresh was when the T was put in. And so when the T was put in, they needed sometimes temporary licenses over people's land or permanent as they were, you know, restoring the rail line. And so with that process, if land is taken, the person has to be compensated for it. It's appraised, but if eminent domain is done by a town, it needs to be approved by town meeting. And then the person, that doesn't mean you're just stuck with that, because they can appeal it. And so it could be very, with the price of land in Cohasset, I would, you know, venture to think, no matter where it is, depending upon what its usage, it could be very expensive. So I would just leave that out for everybody to know.
So,
But the last one that I can remember was when the T did their projects. If there's some minor things with Cohasset, I can't remember too much on the town meeting that we had eminent domain unless it was agreed upon takings of something.
thank you, Dale.
Thank you.
So, Julie, could you go back to slide 12? So we talked about, just sort of refreshing for Glenn and others, one of the concepts we talked about at the Cove, actually all the concepts at the Cove, to address flooding, if we were to pursue them, involve raising Border Street. This particular one also looks at potentially raising walls and basically creating retaining walls here, combined with the 13-foot level of Harbor Cohasset. That's one of the solutions. But I was interested in Glenn coming because there's work being proposed, or actually planned, for the Veterans Memorial, which is right dead center in any solution that happens. And Glenn, I'm wondering if you wouldn't mind just sharing a little bit about what the plan is.
I think if we go back to slide 11 would be good. Good evening, Glenn Pratt, 40 King Street.
In relation to this
The memorial walls at Veterans Park have been being built out over the last 55 years. And now the last one is planned, and if you can see on this, it's hard to see this post, but there's a 22-inch high stone wall memorial that should be built right along the water's edge. So if we go back to the slide on the screen, Jeff, you just put that in. If you go back to the slide on the screen, you see right along the water where it says wetlands, the black starts at the control structure that was pointed out earlier. You go back up to your left.
Just push that button. This button.
So right here at Border Street, there's a Harbor Walk sign there now describing the different stops. And then there is a seawall that comes all the way along and ends at the control structure, which was talked about a little earlier. And this is where the fence ends for the new condos. It comes all along here. So from here, we're gonna be raising the height of that wall all the way back out to Border Street by 22 inches. Not that that's any sort of a solution, but it is a, probably somewhat of a barrier to keep some flow, at least directed someplace other than in the park and into that parking lot. And that project is funded, it's underway, just waiting to get the summer months out of the way before we rip the place up. So that's my little
So Glenn, that project is gonna be
The
built
project-
out this
that
year,
project-
right, in
yes.
2025.
Right, the project was permitted by conservation some time ago. The money has been being raised privately, plus a contribution from community preservation, and we're set to go once we get beyond Memorial Day, I think. So it looks, fairly unimposing, but it may keep some of the water back a little bit.
So Glenn, thank you for that, and I think that helps me to understand, but the potentially solutions, any solution we do at the Cove is gonna raise the road level, either right where the sidewalk joins the road, or it's gonna raise the entire road level. So one way or another, it's gonna sort of change the experience a bit if it happens, if these conceptual solutions are executed, it would change it, possibly create more wall space, courtesy of the town to do more memorials, but we're talking about potentially raising 3 to 5 feet, so it'd be, if a solution happened, it'd be a considerably higher wall than even what you're planning to build this year.
But I think what David Farag was saying is that some of these solutions, they take generations to actually happen, but then when they get in place, they go on forever. And one of the other projects in flood control that's had a lot of success over the years, it took a number of projects to get it done, was James Brook, which used to flood in the village and all by the post office and like that, and two or three different projects of flood control, that seems to be much better now. So that's all I have. Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks very much. Yes.
Hi, Richard Murata, 17 Summer Street. I guess I have two questions. Number one, I know you did phase one of the project. Phase two is going to be the rain.
It's not will, it's the next thing that we would do as a study, if we get funding, is to take these solutions, narrow down to the one we want, and then do a combined analysis of storm surge at that solution, the other solution, with stormwater runoff at the same time.
So what's the time frame? Because I know you were standing there with a stick in 2030, it's past your ankles, and that's only like 4 years and change from now.
Yeah.
So what's the timeline? And then you talked about funding, and so what do we all need to do to ensure that the state of Massachusetts, the federal government, or whoever helps with this funding? Thank you.
Thank you for that. Probably a next easy step is to fund we'll just say, the previous studies were funded, great work done, like $150,000 for each one. They were funded by grants from the Massachusetts Office of Coastal Zone Management, which is a terrific resource for Cohasset. They're the same ones that are sponsoring this flood risk model. That would be a likely target. We're working the planning office, so Julia Gillis, who's here, part of the planning office, is the one who put forth the grant proposals that were awarded 2 years ago. 2 years ago and last year, and then another one wasn't submitted. What I think would be ideal is we try and put forth a grant request, potentially a CZM, to take these solutions another step further. And again, the funding we're talking about there, just roundabouts, let's say it's $200,000, get a grant, wouldn't that be ideal? Doesn't cause any pain to Cohasset. The challenge, so we'll say that would be the next step to answer your question. And that would probably be sponsored by both the planning office and by the Department of Public Works in Cohasset, Brian Joyce is very aware of these, extremely helpful in these solutions. That being said, when a solution happens, each solution is several millions of dollars, and almost any solution we're talking about would be ideally some grant funding, but a very significant portion needs to be supplied by the town of Cohasset. And that's, those priorities are going to be competing with new schools, new town hall, more roads, that kind of stuff. So that's the challenge we face longer term. I think what's been interesting is, even as Harbor Committee has been studying this issue over the last 3 years, we've seen anecdotal evidence that these models are proving that they look pretty accurate in terms of increasing frequency of extreme storms, not only in Cohasset, but of course across the nation and across the world. And also, what Lori, I think that the highest tide on record was ever in Cohasset was what year?
Blizzard of 78, about 18 feet.
1635, 20.
All right, so blizzard of 78 was a high tide. 2018 was also a high tide, right, in the harbor?
Yeah, that was only like 16 feet.
Okay. Anyway, I'm talking. We have a few more minutes, and I'd love to hear from people. Bernadette.
A quick question. Bernadette Faulkner, 17 Black Horse Lane. So George, you had mentioned that ideally you would do, or we would do, 2 solutions. Am I correct in assuming that you mean 1 and either 2 or 3? Is that how it works? Because we've seen 3.
Well, so actually, if you could go back, Julia, to the, I think it's the 2nd slide or 3rd slide. Go way back. That was, next one. Keep going, 3, 4, go to 4, 5. This is it. Highest priority, showing big problems, is 1 and 2, very high priority. 3 is not far behind, but it is behind. So, in terms of just if you believe the data and look at it, you definitely want to go in order 1, 2, and 3. If we could get agreement and funding to do a solution that addresses 2 and 3, well, that would be ideal.
So what I don't see on there, I don't think, is the alternative solution of doing something halfway down Black Horse Lane. Where does that, at Black Horse Lane and what you'd call West, the
actually,
old Westgate?
This is not where the solutions are, it's where the flood path is. So
Okay. So addressing those are flood paths.
These are flood paths, and so solutions could happen.
All
So
over.
you're right, this isn't specific to any one of the
Okay,
solutions I
got it,
showed you.
got it. I'm
Yeah.
crossing them both over. And I guess the second question is maybe more a comment and a general feedback. This is primarily focused on town infrastructure, and really it's the water treatment plant. There may be other ways to protect that, I suppose, at the plant, but
Yeah.
you're assuming the protection, or this is assuming the protection needs to come from flood water, rather than raising the plant, whatever. When, or if ever, does the protecting private property, homeowners, how many of them, what properties are protected in addition, and then overlaid on that, how much each alternative costs? So the 2 questions are,
Yeah,
this is all about protecting town infrastructure, but the side effects are heavily will impact positively or negatively homeowners, all the neighborhoods.
You're right. You're right.
So, does that stream into decision-making at all, or is it really, that's just
No, the problem we're trying to solve is town infrastructure.
Yeah.
The solution, we all need to agree on. To the degree that it can have the most beneficial impact in the neighborhoods it's doing, we would love to do.
That's sort of a soft edges of it, but
It
positive.
is, but I will share, again, we started out saying town infrastructure in Cohasset Harbor was the focus of the Harbor Committee in this meeting. And it's because the problem of flooding is vast. And anybody who lives on Stockbridge Road and Atlantic Avenue can tell you, what about me? And we would love to solve for that. They definitely are going to experience flooding. This flood model you can see for yourself. Lothrop Lane, all the way down Atlantic Avenue, there's going to be big flooding problems. We're not trying to solve for that as much as I would like to, because there's not town infrastructure. It's basically homeowners need to address their own resiliency in those areas. I'm not saying the town won't ever do it, but this is our first focus.
And I would assume at some point, the cost of each of these alternatives will impact which ones might be the most appealing?
Definitely,
Yeah,
definitely.
good, thanks.
Yes?
Hi again.
Oh, is it? Hold on,
I can come with.
come over to this.
Yeah, hi again, Hannes Pfaffenberger, 113 Border Street. This is a question for the experts. The one thing that puzzles me a little bit, 2030 is 3 feet for the elevation over the 8 that we have right now. And
Yes.
2050 is 5 feet, but how come 2030 is only 5 years away? How does that compute?
Yeah, great question. So in terms of the sea level rise projections that the state has adopted, they are conservative estimates. So there's actually a low probability that they will occur in the time frame of 2030. But on the other hand, sea level rise is really only going in one direction, and they will occur down the line at some point. So 2030 is the nearest possible date. It is within the realm of possibility. Right now, sea level rise is not tracking at that rate, fortunately, so we might have a bit more time for those extreme storms. But about 20 years later, that probability of that sea level rise occurring now becomes very possible, more like a coin flip. So the possibility that those elevations might be met by some sea level rise scenario and then future storm on top of that, 2030 and 2050 are near-term, are predictions, conservative predictions. They may or may not occur, but 20, 30 years beyond them, those elevations are really likely to be met. Does that answer your question?
I'm gonna add on to that. I think I understand what you're asking.
Okay.
Can you flip back
Um,
to the slide with the FEMA elevations on it? So you're asking about 3 feet.
You want to see the FEMA slide?
Yeah, the FEMA slide. So asking about the 3 feet over the 3 feet of depth of flooding, right? Well, actually today, when we get to the slide, I'll tell you the exact number, but there's already a chance during a 1% storm of having, so right now, in a present day storm event, the elevation's 9 or 10. So we're already seeing 1 to, and this is historic, this map is older. No. Here, that's where you're seeing the 10, right there. So already we have almost 1 to 2 feet of flooding. So really by 2030, we're looking at another maybe half foot to foot of flooding. And when we're talking about present day, this is, I don't know, what's the FEMA, what's the date that we use for present day?
2008.
2008. So it's looking in the past when we're talking about 2030. It's something that we are already seeing something between those numbers often during storms. That's why we've seen flooding in these areas. So when we're talking about 3 feet of flooding, it's actually not 3 more feet than what we've seen. We've already seen say a foot or to a foot and a half of flooding. We're going to see another in the coming years. But to Connor's point, you know, the rate at which we're seeing that sea level rise occur with the storms, it'll happen. It just, maybe it's not happening. And it also depends on not happening during a specific storm. All depends on how the storm, this is the reason why you see flooding in downtown Boston, but you might not see flooding here, or you see flooding here, but not in downtown Boston. All depends on how the surge is coming in, and that's how we're getting these flooding conditions.
Thank you, Robin. So it's 8:30. You guys have been great. We'll take 2 more questions or comments, and I would love to have 2 more questions or comments. Yes, thank you.
Mary Ellen Coggins, 57 Elm Street. I think you've crushed it in terms of this presentation, by the way. Not easy to talk about. We are hoping to move forward with another study to actually study the hydraulics, as you say. Do you expect at this point that that study would provide further evidence for what we already see as solutions? Or do you think it's going to potentially negate some of the positive effects that have already been studied?
Robin, would you care to opine on that?
Yeah. I don't think it's gonna negate what we've already shown you. I think if anything, it's gonna identify additional things that need to happen. So it's not like a this or that, it's an and, we gotta do it all.
Thank you. Time for one more comment or question.
And we are collecting comments, so we want to make sure that we got that out there. It doesn't have to be a Q&A. I'm here to record your input, and that's what George had said he wanted from this, is input from all of you, so, you know.
Well, you have one more? Okay,
We still have
double up.
time.
Go for
Why
it.
not? Mary Ellen Coggins again. The one thing that I've struggled with in town lately is because we no longer have a mariner, we no longer have an active way of communicating. It's incredible the number of very significant projects that all of a sudden come to town meeting. You know, we see in the warrant, we start hearing about, but there's no time to really get that information basis. This is obviously huge. It's going to cost a lot of money. Would this body start working on a communication plan as soon as it looks like the trajectory looks likely of the way we're going to go, and figure out different ways to communicate about this so that more people are brought along before it gets to town meeting for a vote?
Answer is, I'll share what we did this time. We went online only. I hope everybody signed up. I promise not to spam you, but we have a Harbor Committee email list that I send out for meetings, and you can ignore what you don't care about and follow the ones you do. We use Cohasset 143, which my experience is just filled with stuff, so it's marginal. Right now, the best source for us has been Cohasset Anchor, also online. Carol Meyer-Sutton is awesome, likes to cover this, thinks this is important, and they've done very good coverage of the work that Harbor Committee's done. So that's something we're going to continue to leverage.
And the town website.
And the town, thank you.
That's a basic one.
And Julia's been great in upgrading our website. We have resources on that. On the last page of your handout, please take this with you. There's all the resources on this one. And every one of those, the one that I find most interesting is on the left. You can go to the Mass Coastal Flood Risk Viewer and see exactly what we just showed you in slides 6, 7, 8, and 9. And you can drill in to your house and see exactly what it shows and form your own opinions on that. If you're thinking of buying oceanfront real estate in Cohasset, really good to check this first. But I think what we'll look to, we'll talk among the committee about what other opportunities. We certainly, at the rate this is going, this isn't going to catch people by surprise, but we see certainly opportunities to promote it more broadly.
And do continue to talk to your neighbors, because word of mouth is always a trustworthy source of communication as well. And George purposely reached out to people who are residents of Elm and Summer and Black Horse Lane, because we wanted you here.
Thank you for being
We're
here.
also very open to any further suggestions that anybody, thank you, George. We're also very open to any suggestions anyone has. You know, it's a volunteer committee, but we'd like to do more if it's within our resources and capabilities. So if anyone can reach out to George or anybody on this committee for any further input.
I'm going to close the meeting. Really appreciate your attendance and really great questions. Terrific having Robin and Connor here today. Thank you for that. And because this is an official meeting, can I have a motion to adjourn? Second?
Second.
All in favor, signify by saying aye. Aye. Meeting is adjourned. Thank you.